The antiseptic smell of the maternity ward mixed with the sweet scent of her newborn daughter, a contrast that, in minutes, would represent her new life. Only 6 hours had passed since the cesarean section that brought Sofia into the world, and Marina Santos, still feeling the sharp pain of her stitches and the profound exhaustion of childbirth, cradled the little miracle in her arms, feeling a happiness that seemed to fill every corner of her soul. It was at this exact moment of vulnerability and ecstasy that her husband, Eduardo, entered. He wasn't smiling. In his hands there were no flowers, but a brown envelope that he extended with frightening coldness. Inside it, Marina's world collapsed. The divorce papers. As if that weren't enough, he revealed that his secretary, Carla, was 4 months pregnant and their wedding was already set. The door opened again and Carla, young and radiant, entered with an air of victory, cementing the cruelest scene Marina could ever imagine. Stunned, Marina could barely breathe, feeling the air escape her as her heart pounded uncontrollably. Eduardo's words came like physical blows, each one tearing away a piece of her 15 years of dedication. "You were adequate, Marina. You fulfilled your role all this time, but I never truly loved you," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. He then detailed his generosity, a child support payment of 300 reais for Sofia and 60 days for her to vacate the house she helped. Build. His look of contempt met hers, which was filled with tears and disbelief. "And don't delude yourself," he finished, with a cold smile that never reached his eyes as Carla ran a hand over her own belly. "You'll never achieve anything on your own." The sentence echoed in the silence of the room, a verdict he believed to be final, but which, for Marina, had just become the fuel for the most difficult and transformative journey of her life. Leaving the maternity ward lacked the glow she had dreamed of for 9 months. Instead of going home with her husband to start a new life as a family of 3, Marina found herself in a taxi, with little Sofia asleep in her lap and a single suitcase on the passenger seat, heading to her friend Julia's apartment. The envelope with the divorce papers seemed to burn inside her purse, a physical and constant reminder of the demolition of her existence. Julia welcomed her with open arms, with a look that mixed fury for Eduardo and immense affection. Before her, preparing the guest room without asking unnecessary questions. It was there, trying to make a transfer through the bank's app to buy diapers, that Marina felt the second punch to the gut. Their joint account was empty and her access blocked. Desperate, she called the manager, who, with an embarrassed voice, confirmed that Eduardo had withdrawn all the money and removed her from the account that morning. With only 80 reais in her wallet, a daughter in her arms, and the clothes on her back, she realized the extent of his plan, to leave her with absolutely nothing. The cold terror of helplessness paralyzed her, but the worst was yet to come. The phone rang. It was Eduardo. His voice, now pure venom, said that if she didn't accept the terms without a fight, he would contest Sofia's paternity in court just to publicly humiliate her. Marina felt the ground disappear. He had no doubt the daughter was his. This was pure malice, a weapon to ensure her total submission. The next day brought the materialization of the threat with a speed she hadn't thought possible. A court officer knocked on the door of Julia's apartment, handing Marina a notice to remove her personal belongings from the house within 24 hours, nullifying the verbal promise of 60 days. The rush, she understood, was so that the new bride could move in as soon as possible. While an indignant Julia called a lawyer friend, Marina's phone rang again. This time, it was Carla, with a falsely sweet and victorious voice. The secretary informed her that Eduardo had re-evaluated the situation and that the child support would be 200 reais. "After all, Marina, you have no expenses living off someone's charity, do you? And we have to save for our wedding, which, by the way, will be in the new house, you understand." Every word was a stab. At that moment, Eduardo's speech about her being an outdated housewife and useless hammered in her mind. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw what he described, a woman in pajamas with deep dark circles, her body still recovering from surgery, completely broken. The urge to give in, to accept the 200 reais just to end the torture, was overwhelming. But then her gaze met Sophia, sleeping peacefully in the makeshift crib. In that instant, the pain turned to fury, a primal, protective rage. That was when Julia hung up the phone and said, "Enough crying. You are not the woman he says you are. You are Marina Santos, a brilliant engineer. I have a small consulting project. It's yours. It's the first step." And for the first time in days, Marina cried not from sadness, but from a newfound determination. The war had begun. That first consulting project Julia got for her was like a glass of water in the desert. As she immersed herself in calculations and blueprints, Marina felt parts of her brain that had been dormant for years awaken with a hum of energy. The logic, the precision, the satisfaction of finding an elegant solution to an engineering problem. It was all still there, buried under layers of pain and self-deprecation. However, the small financial victory and the rescue of her confidence were quickly overshadowed by the harsh reality of the market. She sent out dozens of resumes, but the responses were always negative or worse, non-existent. What she didn't know was that Eduardo, in his methodical cruelty, had made a point of calling some of his old contacts in the industry, poisoning the well, with lies about her supposed emotional instability after childbirth. To the world, she was just what he wanted her to be, an outdated and unreliable professional. The lawyer Julia contacted was brutally honest. Without concrete proof of Eduardo's real income, the court would likely lean towards the ridiculously low amount he offered. The injustice was infuriating. It was on a sleepless night, tossing and turning in bed while listening to Sophia's soft breathing, that the most insane and dangerous idea emerged: a vacancy for a cleaning assistant at Mendez Enterprises. It would be the final humiliation or her only chance to get the proof she needed. Swallowing her pride and fear, she applied using her maiden name, feeling like she was about to enter the lion's den, not as a victim, but as a disguised hunter. Putting on that simple, anonymous blue uniform was one of the most difficult and liberating acts of Marina's life. For the first few weeks, she became invisible, a ghost, pushing a cleaning cart through the corridors of the company she once visited as the owner's wife. She saw Eduardo pass by her several times, immersed in his own world of power, without even a second glance at the woman cleaning the floor of his empire. She saw Carla, now with a prominent baby bump, parading around like a queen, giving orders and treating employees with veiled contempt. The anger burned in her chest, but she transformed it into fuel, into focus. Patiently, she learned the office. Routine, the schedules, the blind spots of the security cameras, the financial director's habit of leaving his office open when he went to get his coffee in the late afternoon. And then, the opportunity arose. On a Friday, the man left his desk with his computer screen on and a pile of papers beside it. Marina's heart raced. With the excuse of emptying the wastebasket, she entered the office. Her hands trembled, but her mind was sharp. She took out the cheap cell phone she had bought for this mission and in seconds photographed the payroll sheets, the bonus statements, the irrefutable proof that Eduardo earned at least 15,000 reais, not the 10,000 he had cynically declared to the court. She left the office moments before the director returned, her heart pounding in her throat. That night, safe in Julia's apartment, she looked at the images on her phone screen. They weren't just photos. They were her ammunition, her first major victory in the war he had started. She had won the first round, using the invisibility he imposed on her as her greatest weapon. With the evidence against Eduardo secured as a trump card, Marina felt a seismic shift in her spirit. The hunt was over. Now the rebuilding began. She rewrote her resume, The consulting experience Julia had given her now taking a prominent place, a testament that she hadn't been completely idle. That's how she landed an interview at Constructora Horizonte, a medium-sized company but highly respected for the quality of its projects. The director, Artur Mendonça, was a man in his early 50s, with a gaze that seemed to pierce steel and a reputation for being ruthless with mediocrity, but fair with talent. He analyzed Marina's resume, his eyes lingering on the enormous 15-year gap. "Mrs. Santos," he began, his voice deep and direct. 15 years is a lifetime away from a construction site. The technology of materials, the calculation software, the technical standards, everything has changed. With all due respect, why should I risk hiring someone so outdated? The tone wasn't cruel like Eduardo's, but it was a challenge. There, Marina did not shrink. She faced him, her posture erect. "Because the intelligence to solve problems doesn't become outdated, sir. And neither does the hunger to work. Give me the problem that no one on your team wants to solve. Put me to the test. If I'm not capable, you will never hear from me again." The audacity and the raw, naked confidence in her eyes surprised Artur. He, who valued courage, decided to take a chance. "All right, Santos. Junior engineer position, intern salary. Take it or leave it." Marina didn't hesitate. "I'll take it." She was back in the game. Her return was a humbling experience. She was placed at a small desk in the corner of the room, tasked with jobs that newly graduated engineers would find tedious, reviewing old blueprints, checking material lists, organizing digital files. Her younger colleagues treated her with a condescending cordiality, like an aunt who had decided to take up a hobby. But Marina didn't care. She absorbed everything, every conversation, every new software she studied at night through online tutorials, every detail of the ongoing projects. She was learning the language of modern engineering with astonishing speed. About a month after she was hired, the crisis hit. One of Horizonte's most ambitious projects, a 12-story commercial building, had a calculation flaw in its foundations. That was only discovered late in the game. The construction stopped. Panic set in. The initial estimates for the correction involved the partial demolition of 3 floors and a loss that could bankrupt the company. Artur Mendonça seemed to age 10 years in a week. While the senior engineers bickered in fruitless meetings, Marina, the junior engineer, took copies of the blueprints home. For 3 days and 3 nights, with the help of books she bought at second-hand stores and the silence of the early morning, she delved into the problem, her mind working with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She found the error, but more than that, she found a solution that no one had considered, a reinforcement technique with injected micropiles, which would avoid any demolition. The next morning, without an appointment, she walked into Artur's office, spread her calculations and drawings on his desk, and said with a firm voice, "Sir, I know how to save your building and your company." Artur, who first looked at her with irritation for the interruption, saw the spark of genius there on those sheets of paper. He saw her, for the first time, not as a risky bet, but as the future of his construction company. Marina's brilliant solution for the commercial building project echoed through the halls of Constructora Horizonte like a shockwave. In a general meeting called by Artur Mendonça, he not only announced that the project was saved, but he made sure to put Marina in the spotlight, detailing her intelligence and initiative. That same day, she was promoted from junior engineer to lead engineer of the very project she had rescued. With a salary commensurate with her new and immense responsibility, the condescending looks from her colleagues turned into admiration and respect. With her first paychecks, she could finally leave the cozy but temporary refuge of Julia's house and rent a modest but decent apartment for herself and Sophia. For the first time in months, as she put her daughter to sleep in her own little room, Marina felt the peace of stability. However, The construction industry is a village where news, good and bad, travels at the speed of light. The story of the forgotten engineer who saved Horizonte from a $1 million disaster became a legend whispered in meetings and on construction sites. Inevitably, the legend reached Eduardo's ears. His reaction was not one of surprise, but of narcissistic fury. The woman he had discarded, the outdated housewife he had sentenced to failure, was winning. Her success was a mirror that reflected how wrong and small he was, and his ego could not bear that image. In his sick mind, her success was a betrayal of his prophecy. He needed to destroy her, no longer professionally, but in the one place that would completely annihilate her, in her love for Sofia. Marina was living in the calm before the storm. On a Saturday afternoon, while building a small block castle on the living room floor with Sofia, who giggled with every colorful piece her mother stacked, she allowed herself to dream of a peaceful future. The doorbell rang, breaking the bubble of happiness. When she opened the door, her stomach turned to ice. Another court officer, another envelope. The feeling of déjà vu was so strong that her legs weakened. She took the document with trembling hands and opened it. And then, the world collapsed in a way she never thought possible. It was a summons. Eduardo was filing for full and unilateral custody of Sofia. The words leaped from the page, each one more venomous than the last. The petition described her as a mentally unstable, psychologically shaken, and incapable woman of caring for a child. And the main proof of her madness, according to him, the fact that she had accepted a job as a cleaning lady. His lawyer twisted Marina's act of desperation and courage into a symptom of imbalance, a psychotic break from a professional who couldn't accept her new reality. He was using Marina's greatest proof of love for her daughter as the main weapon to tear her from her arms. The tears streaming down her face were not of sadness, but of absolute horror. He had turned her sacrifice into an aberration. Looking at the innocent face of Sofia, who was now staring at her with curiosity, a flame of fury ignited amidst the despair, a steel-like certainty. He would not succeed. He would not take her daughter. The news of the custody lawsuit hit Constructora Horizonte like a bombshell. Marina, her face pale and her eyes teary from lack of sleep, went to Artur Mendonça's office to inform him that she would need to be absent for meetings with lawyers, prepared for the worst. Artur, however, listened to her with a concerning calm, and at the end asked to see the lawsuit petition. He read every line of the accusations, his usually impassive face contorting into a mask of disbelief and repulsion. As an experienced businessman who had seen the best and worst of human nature, he felt that there was something profoundly wrong. The image of an unstable mother and unbalanced professional did not fit with the brilliant and resilient engineer who had saved his company. Driven by a protective instinct and a nose for lies, Artur decided to act. He picked up his phone and did something that only a man with decades of contacts and respect in the market could do. He started calling the owners and directors of the other construction companies to which Marina had sent her resume. The very first conversation was revealing. "Artur, my friend, her resume was impeccable, but her ex-husband called me. A certain Eduardo Mendez said she was suffering from terrible postpartum depression, that she wasn't reliable. He made it sound like a friendly warning to protect me." Artur felt a chill. He made 4 more calls. The story repeated itself in all of them, with minor variations. Eduardo had not only humiliated and discarded her, he had orchestrated a systematic and silent campaign to ensure she remained unemployed, dependent, and broken. It wasn't a recent retaliation. It was a long-term project to keep her under his control. The cruelty of the plan was of a perversity that Artur had rarely seen. With the weight of that dark discovery, Artur Mendonça called Marina back to his office. She entered hesitantly, fear stamped on her face. expecting to be fired or, at best, put on forced leave. What she found was an Arthur with eyes sparking with a cold, controlled fury. "Marina, sit down," he said, his voice deeper than usual. "I know what he did. I know why you couldn't get a job before you came here. He called everyone. He poisoned every well before you could drink the water. That cleaning job. It wasn't you being crazy. It was the only path he left you." Hearing that, Marina felt a wave of painful validation. It wasn't her. It had never been her. The guilt she carried, the feeling of being inadequate, all of it had been manufactured by him. Arthur leaned over the desk, his expression that of a general about to go into battle. "This attack of his wasn't just against you, Marina. It was against my chief engineer, against the stability of my company, and I do not tolerate that." He paused, letting the weight of his words fill the room. "Therefore, I'm not just going to give you a lawyer. I want you to accept becoming my partner. I am offering you 30% of Constructora Horizonte, with the assets, stability, and power that this position gives you. I want to see which judge will have the audacity to even suggest that you are incapable of caring for your daughter." Marina was in absolute silence, the air knocked out of her lungs. The proposal was so overwhelming, so transformative that it felt unreal. Arthur wasn't offering her a job, he was offering her armor, a fortress, and declaring war by her side. In that instant, the scales of justice didn't just balance, they tipped violently in her favor. The custody hearing turned into a true battlefield, but this time, Marina was no longer on the defensive. She entered the courtroom not as the victim Eduardo expected to see, but as Marina Santos, partner at Constructora Horizonte, a woman whose posture exuded power and serenity. Beside her, a team of top-tier lawyers hired by Arthur prepared for the offensive. Eduardo's lawyer began his attack, painting a picture of a deranged mother using the cleaning job episode as his centerpiece. It was a colossal mistake. Marina's lawyer not only reframed the act as that of a brave and desperate mother, but also called Arthur Mendonça himself to the witness stand. In a firm voice, Arthur exposed to the judge, in detail, the smear campaign that Eduardo had orchestrated, presenting signed statements from other business owners. He demolished the image of a concerned ex-husband and revealed the cruel manipulator he was. The final blow came with the photos of Eduardo's pay stub, proving he had lied about his income. The judge, an experienced man, looked at Eduardo with a disgust he barely concealed. The sentence was a massacre. Marina was granted full and unrestricted custody of Sofia. The child support, previously offered at 200 reais, was set at 4,000 reais per month, with retroactive payment since the child's birth. Eduardo left the courthouse not only defeated, but demoralized and publicly unmasked. Marina, embracing Julia and Arthur outside, felt months of weight dissolve, replaced by the purest and sweetest sense of justice. A few months after the overwhelming victory in court, the universe decided to give Marina the chance to close the chapter on Eduardo once and for all, this time on his battlefield. The state government announced the largest public bid in the last 10 years, a 500 million real project for the construction of a state-of-the-art hospital complex. It was the kind of contract that would define the future of any company that won it. Both Constructora Horizonte and Mendes Enterprises entered the race. For Eduardo, it was a matter of survival, a chance to rise again after the financial and moral blow. For Marina, it was the chance to prove her worth on a scale never before imagined. While Eduardo prepared a conventional and predictable proposal, Marina led her team with a revolutionary vision. She designed a sustainable hospital with energy efficiency, water recycling systems, and a modular architecture that would allow for future expansions with reduced cost and time. Her proposal was not just cheaper in the long run, it was smarter, more humane, and more modern. On the day of the final presentation, Eduardo gave his usual arrogant and self-confident speech. Then, Marina took the stage. With calm, precision, and a contagious passion, she didn't just present a project, she sold a dream. The result was unanimous. Constructora Horizonte was declared the winner. The committee praised the proposal as brilliant and a new paradigm for public works. Marina watched Eduardo from across the room. His face, pale, was the image of absolute defeat. She had not just beaten him, she had surpassed him in a way so complete and undeniable in front of the entire industry that his phrase, "You'll never achieve anything on your own," now sounded like the greatest and most delicious irony of fate. 2 years passed, and time, that implacable judge, saw to it that each got what they deserved. Marina Santos was no longer just a partner. She was the pulsating heart of the now renamed Horizonte SA, a powerhouse on the international construction scene. Her face graced the covers of business magazines, like Forbes Engineering, and her story of overcoming adversity was told in lectures she gave at conferences in Berlin and Singapore. The hospital complex became a landmark, a testament to her vision. She was living proof that talent, when fueled by determination, is an unstoppable force. Sophia, now a talkative and happy little girl, grew up in a home full of love and stability without any shadow of the traumatic past. In brutal contrast, Eduardo Mendez's life had imploded. The loss of the $1 million contract was the fatal blow to his company, which, already shaken by a bad reputation and growing debts, went bankrupt spectacularly. Mendez Enterprises turned to dust, and Carla, the woman for whom he destroyed his family, proved that her loyalty was as solid as his finances. As soon as the money ran out, she abandoned him, taking their young son and disappearing from his life in search of a new provider. Eduardo was left alone, broken, and to complete his ruin, he was diagnosed with an aggressive and terminal cancer. It was on a cold autumn afternoon that the phone in Marina's office rang. The assistant, recognizing the name, tried to block the call, but Marina, with a calm that surprised herself, asked to be put through. The voice on the other end was weak, a hoarse whisper, almost unrecognizable. It was Eduardo. He wasn't asking for money, not for help. He was only asking for one last conversation, driven by a dark curiosity and the feeling that she needed to close that circle forever. Marina agreed to meet him at a cafe. The man waiting for her at a corner table was a ghost, thin, pale, stooped. He seemed to carry the weight of all his mistakes on his back. The arrogance that once defined him had been replaced by a desperate emptiness. Without beating around the bush, his eyes filled with a pathetic remorse, he confessed. "I planned everything, Marina. The affair, the humiliation at the maternity ward. It was all orchestrated." He revealed that the affair with Carla wasn't about passion, but a strategic choice. He chose her because she was submissive, predictable, and would never be a threat. "The truth," he said, and for the first time he seemed sincere, his voice cracking, "is that I was always afraid of you, of your brilliance. I knew that the day you decided to go back to work, you would become much greater than me. I couldn't stand being second, the lesser one. I had to destroy you first, so you would never discover what you were capable of. I needed to keep you small so that I could feel big." The confession brought Marina no pain, but a crystal clarity. Her fall had not been an act of fate, it was a deliberate act, born of his fear and weakness. Marina watched him for a long moment, the man who had been the architect of her greatest pain. On his face, she didn't see the monster that had haunted her for so long, but the pathetic figure of a weak man, corroded by his own poison. The anger that once consumed her had transformed into a cold, distant compassion. When she finally spoke, her voice was firm, without a hint of hatred or triumph, only the clarity of someone who sees the full picture. "I forgive you, Eduardo." A glimmer of relief passed through his eyes, but it was extinguished by her next words. But make no mistake, it is not so that you can find peace. That is on your own account. I forgive you to free myself, to cut the last anchor that tied me to you and to all the suffering you caused. You pushed me to the bottom of the well, but you didn't understand that down there I found the solid ground to get the biggest boost of my life. She stood up, the personification of dignity. In a terribly ironic way for you, your cruelty was what forced me to become the strongest version of myself. Everything I am today was built on the ruins of what you tried to destroy. You were the driving force of my victory. Without looking back, she left the cafe, forever abandoning the ghost of her past at the table. The final scene could not have been more emblematic. A sumptuous ballroom in Paris, illuminated by crystal chandeliers, hosted the elite of global engineering. Marina, stunning in a dress that was both elegant and powerful, took the stage to a thunderous ovation to receive the International Engineer of the Year Award. With the trophy in her hands, she looked at the audience, where Arthur, Julia, and a little Sophia, now almost 4 years old, applauded her with eyes full of proud tears. Her voice resonated through the microphone, strong and clear. They tell us we are not capable. They try to make us believe that our place is in the shadows. But today, I say to every woman who has ever heard this, our place is wherever we want it to be. It is at the top of the tallest building, at the head of the largest company, at the forefront of innovation. She paused, her gaze meeting her daughter's. That is why tonight I announce the creation of the Santos Foundation, an organization that will provide legal, psychological, and financial support to mothers who were led to believe they could achieve nothing on their own. We will show the world that, together, we don't just achieve, we build empires. The applause that followed was deafening. There, under the lights of Paris, Marina was not just an award-winning engineer. She was a symbol, a beacon of hope. Her victory was not just over one man, but over a system, reaffirming her worth, her strength, and her identity in a definitive and inspiring way.